Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the World Wanderers podcast. If you're a long-time listener, you will be excited about this episode because we are doing a catch-up with a guest that we had for the first time, well, all the way back in the spring of 2016. Jake Desyllas from the Voluntary Life joined us in 2016 to talk about his book, Job Free, where he outlines different ways of creating a life that is more in line with whatever life you want to live. So he talked about extreme savings as a way to retire early. He talked about entrepreneurship as a way to kind of create a life more in line with your values and goals. He talked about working a job in a way that gives you a more improved lifestyle. So kind of the things we did in the past of moving to a town you really want to live in, moving to a place that you want to go on vacation and finding a job there instead of working somewhere you don't want to live so that you can take a vacation to somewhere you do want to be, and other ways as well of kind of creating a life that's free of that job mentality, at least, if not free of a job. So it was a really cool episode. And we also talked to him about permanently traveling. So at that time, he had left England. He was in the process of expatriating, had set himself up with his wife in Panama, and they were going about adapting to life in Latin America. And we were talking about all of that back in 2016. And so we wanted to catch up with Jake now that it's been a few years and find out where life has taken him. And so I think you'll be excited about some of the updates in this episode, and really fascinating chat catching up with Jake. All right, so we are excited to be joined again by Jake Desyllas from the Voluntary Life. Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, we're really excited to catch up. And so the last time we talked was in the spring of 2016. And I can't remember if you were just getting started or a little ways into it, but basing yourself in Panama, and we're actually back in the UK temporarily at that point in time. And I know a lot has changed since that point, but where in the world are you right now? Where are you talking to us from?
I am back in Brighton.
Wonderful. How is it there?
It's great. Yeah, it's today is a nice sunny day, and we may have a little bit of noise from the outside because there's scaffolding outside a building across the road, and they're taking it down. So if you hear any strange clunking noises, that's what's happening.
That's funny. Yeah, we're currently in Monterrey in Mexico, and we got here, a beautiful apartment. It's just an Airbnb for the week, and we got here like nice and quiet, and then I woke up this morning and there's a construction site directly out of our window, so there's some scraping and stuff back there too. It seems to always happen when you schedule a podcast interview. Construction workers are like magnetically attracted to it.
Yes.
And so last time we talked, you had based yourself in Panama. And so I was wondering if you could give kind of a quick overview. I know there's a great episode on your podcast, The Voluntary Life, that people can check out about the decision to not go through finish the pregnancy in Panama. But if you kind of just give a bit of an overview and an update on, life since then in terms of travel and life overall.
Yeah, sure. So I think when we spoke, it was just before my daughter was born. She was born in the summer of 2016, and we were back in the UK again, back in Brighton. And so we stayed in the UK for the first 6 months or so, just after she was born. And we were just living in a rental there and kind of getting used to being a family and having our daughter. And then we decided to go traveling again. So we, in the winter of just the beginning of 2017, we left for Spain. And we went to Girona, which is a really nice little town just near Barcelona in Catalonia. And we lived there and stayed in various Airbnbs for a couple of months each, and just enjoyed all through to the autumn of 2017. And we went and lived in the States just for a quick visit for 2 months. We visited friends and stayed in New Hampshire, which was really nice. And then came back to Spain, lived in Barcelona, and had a great time traveling with our daughter all through that year. And then we decided at the beginning of 2018 that we just wanted to have some more stability for her and be somewhere permanently. So we looked into lots of different options. We thought about staying in Barcelona. We thought about Spain. We also did some research into Portugal. And for various reasons, which I can sort of go into, we decided to come back to the UK again. And this summer, we had another baby. So we now have a son too. His name's Felix, and he was born in July. And so now we're living back in the UK, and we're taking time really to be here while the kids are young, to have a kind of permanent base for them. We will still do some traveling. In the winter, we're going to go back to Spain again, but that'll be more for a couple of months. It'll just be basically short trips, especially when it's cold. And we're just going to base ourselves here for a while to give the kids a place that they can kind of have some stability and so forth. And then we're going to see how it goes and see sort of what, as they develop, what their interests are, and whether they're going to be up for traveling later is something that I would be delighted if they are, but we definitely want to give them some more stability first.
That's amazing. Congrats on your second child. We had no idea. I looked at Ryan and I was like, did you know? And he's like, no. So super, super exciting. I'm curious, with that year travel that you guys did with your daughter in 2017, 2018, I think you said it was, what was that like? Like, what sort of changed for you guys in terms of how you travel and what you did having a baby with you?
Well, in terms of what it was like, that period from when she was about 6 months to about a year and a half was a very easy period to travel. The first 6 months, it's really difficult. You're just getting used to being a parent and so forth. And it's also a very vulnerable time. But there's a kind of a sweet spot between 6 months and a year and a half where we found it actually surprisingly easy to travel because was obviously not going to be running off anywhere, and was also still very much focused just on us and on learning how to talk, learning how to walk, and that kind of thing. So it was actually quite easy. We didn't go very far. Spain's an easy flight away from the UK. Actually, having said that, though, we did go to New Hampshire, so that was a long haul there and back. But we found it quite straightforward. Our lifestyle was fairly similar to when we were traveling just as a couple, in the sense that we still were living out of one suitcase each, and then we had one additional suitcase for our daughter. And again, when a child's that young, they don't need that much stuff anyway. So that obviously changes and has changed as she's got older. But the big differences are just mainly not going out in the evenings. That's a big lifestyle change. Getting very early nights and getting up early in the morning, and generally just being more daytime people. And obviously our lifestyle changed too in terms of places that we went. We don't really go out to restaurants very much anymore because it's quite it's a big event going out to something like that. And so we're much more home based, but living in a place like Girona and even in Barcelona was very easy. There's lots of, it's a very child-friendly country, and there's a lot of focus on kids. There's lots of playgrounds and stuff like that. So yeah, it was quite easy. But having said that, what we noticed was that as my daughter got older and was able to walk and was able to get an understanding of her environment and her surroundings, we noticed how important it was for her to have predictable routines and to know where she was going and stuff. And when you do that travel lifestyle, you're just moving so much and moving into new places and staying in different Airbnbs. And it's a lot of upheaval for adults, but it's changing kind of the whole world for a child. And so we just got the sense that actually she would really thrive if we were in one place for a longer period. And that was kind of the thinking behind coming back to the UK and just finding a place where she would be able to know the surrounding area and know like what her favorite places are to go and that kind of thing. And so that's really how our lifestyle's changed now. We're much more home based, and the travel that we will be doing this winter, we're going back to Spain, as I said, and that will be more of kind of a long holiday. It's going to be a couple of months, but it's not the same as going from Airbnb to Airbnb.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear, and something I think we've definitely thought more about. We spent the last or 2 weekends ago with a few friends who we have here in Mexico who we were based in Guadalajara for the past 2 months, and they were living just outside of there in a small town called Ajijic. And they're traveling with kids, I think 6 and 3.
6 and 4.
6 and 4. And so they kind of were realizing the same thing about, especially the routines, the habits, and the community being a really big challenge for them. And so they actually put their kids into a Spanish school in Mexico. So they're learning Spanish. It's quite funny as well because they're so little and they still getting a grasp of English, but they'll like correct all of our Spanish whenever we mispronounce anything. But I am curious, kind of a 2-part question. What was that kind of decision-making process like? Was it something that you had kind of resistance to and kind of had to come around to? Was it something you were like, no, this is definitely the best decision for us to go base ourselves back in the UK? And then kind of for you personally, what's that transition been like into just having more of that home base and being in the UK especially?
Well, it's been a decision that we've had to think about a lot. Not so much because we've been resisting coming back. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to come back to the UK if it wasn't for the fact that we have a family now. But when we decided to have kids, both Hannah and I, my wife and I, were really on the same page about, okay, we're just going to do whatever is best for them. And so we kind of had already made that psychological adjustment to deciding that we would not try and kind of fit them into our lifestyle, but we would actually try and do what we think is the right thing to do. Having said that, it's still an open question, like, well, what is the right thing to do? Where is the best place to be? And there are certainly downsides to being in the UK. And as you know, we talked about before, it would have been great if we'd managed to stay in Panama to give my daughter dual nationality, which she would have had if she was born there. So there are upsides to living in other places. It's certainly great to be bilingual and to grow up with 2 languages. That's an awesome thing to have too. But there are more important things in terms of kind of stability, and community, in fact, is one of them. And that's an important thing too, is that we've been looking into that. But another consideration for us has also been thinking about this question of schooling. And in particular, because we're very much oriented towards homeschooling, when we looked into living in Spain and we looked into what the rules would be about homeschooling, it's not supportive of homeschooling. You can kind of do it in Catalonia, and people kind of do, but it's a little bit breaking the rules and the rules not being fully enforced in Catalonia. In general, it's not a homeschooling friendly environment in Spain. And so we were looking at different alternatives in other places in Europe. And we also looked at Portugal. Portugal, you can homeschool, but you've got to do various exams. The kids have got to do these exams to prove that they're keeping up with the school curriculum in Portuguese schools. So in the end of the day, you kind of have to do Portuguese schooling curriculum anyway. So basically, the UK is a place where you can do homeschooling. And we're still exploring different education alternatives as well. But because that's an important option for us to have, that was a pretty big consideration in us thinking about where we wanted to live. And so that was one of the things that kind of swung it for us in terms of coming back to the UK.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think it's always interesting to think about, when you have children, it's like you're not just responsible for yourself or for you and your partner and making these independent decisions. It's like you're making decisions for somebody who can't make their own decisions for them, which is, a great responsibility, obviously. So I love what you're talking about with considering, what's going to be best for the kids and then figuring out what does it mean to what does it actually mean to do, the best for them.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by Away. Away creates thoughtful travel products designed to change how you see the world. They started with the perfect suitcase, crafted with features that make travel more seamless. And now they offer a range of essentials that solve real travel problems. So all you have to think about is where you're headed next. Away knows that everyone has a different travel style. That's why they make their products in an array of colors, sizes, and materials, so that everyone has something to choose from that they love.
And we actually have the carry-on suitcase from Away in a beautiful navy blue. It's lightweight, durable, and built to last, and it has 4 360-degree wheels, which means if you're carrying it or wheeling it around, it's going to be easy and smooth. One of the other things we love about Away is that all their products come with a limited lifetime warranty, which means they'll fix or replace your bag if it ever gets damaged. And the carry-on comes with a 100-day trial, which means that you can try the product and make sure that you're going to love it.
So if you've been looking to up your travel game, you can get $20 off a suitcase by visiting awaytravel.com/wanderers and use promo code WANDERERS during checkout. WANDERERS. Once again, for $20 off a suitcase, visit awaytravel.com/wanderers and use promo code WANDERERS during checkout.
Something that I'm curious about, because we talked about this a lot the last time we chatted with you, is the minimalistic side of things. What's that look like now that you're back in the UK and you guys have a home and a family? And part of the reason why I ask is I remember when we chatted with you, I was like, we got off the call and I was like, man, this minimalism thing is so hard. And at that point, we didn't have that much stuff. But I find that every time we're back in Canada or anywhere for a period that's longer than like 3 or 4 months, I feel like we just naturally start collecting stuff that kind of makes us more comfortable there. So I'm curious how that's been going for you guys now that you've got this home base.
Yeah, that's a real lifestyle challenge when you have kids. And it's an interesting one because we had to think about this a lot too, because the question, again, if you want to do the right thing for your kids, is it right to then say, okay, kids, you are going to be minimalists and you're being brought up by minimalist parents, so that's the way you're going to live too. And the way I feel about it is just because I'm a minimalist, it doesn't mean that my kids have to be. And, I don't think it's ultimately an ethical question. It's like if you accumulate more stuff in life, it's not like you're a bad person or something. And it's just in a way, it's a lifestyle choice. I think there are great benefits to it. And I'm still a minimalist in the sense that I can still fit all of my personal possessions into a suitcase, but we now have an apartment with furniture and with stuff for the kids. And so there's a lot of stuff for the family that is no longer a kind of one suitcase lifestyle at all. And that's a big transition. It was certainly something. Originally, when we came back to the UK, we were just planning on getting another rental and staying in another rental. And we'd been very happy being in Airbnbs and being in rentals. And furnished places are great because you don't have to think about maintaining stuff and the furniture. It's somebody else's problem. And as long as the place is nice, I'm quite happy to adjust to whatever furniture's there. But again, that's different. When you have kids, you have to think about baby-proofing a place, and you have to think about whether or not stuff in an environment is good for the kids too. So having come back to the UK and gone into a rental and sort of made it work, but found all sorts of issues that just were not great for the kids, both in terms of, just, as I say, baby-proofing type stuff, but also neighbors that were not that great. And we had various problems in the rentals that we were in. And we just decided, right, let's just get a place that is going to work and is going to be a nice environment. And so we bought a flat and we filled it with furniture, all from IKEA, just filled the place up. And it's all stuff that, none of it, we don't have anything here that I'm going to, that I feel any deep emotional attachment to. We don't have any vintage stuff or really meaningful possessions here. As my approach to it is all very utilitarian. Everything that we've bought, as far as I'm concerned, is serving a purpose for this phase of our lives. And when it comes to sell it all again, I'm going to be very happy to. I don't feel any great attachment to it. But it's a conscious choice to actually have a base. And if you're going to do that, you might as well do it properly and have a place where you control all of the stuff that's in the apartment. So all of it's child friendly, and you can create safe spaces for them to basically play and be able to do whatever they want to do without it being an issue. So that's what we've done. And I definitely would prefer not to have to deal with the hassle that goes along with maintaining all of this stuff. And I look forward to a time in my life when I won't have to deal with it again. But I consider it just to be one of those things. This is just part of the process. You know, you have responsibilities, and that's what comes with it. So I'm just treating it like a project in the sense that we've bought all this IKEA furniture, we put it all in this flat, we've set it all up and made it a nice environment. And as I said, when it comes to move on, I'll be fine to do so, because it all just serves a purpose as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think so much of it too is like just being able to, you said like to identifying the purpose, and also being able to appreciate it after you've kind of gone without it for a while. One of the things that I feel like for us over the past few years of basically living out of Airbnbs the whole time, it's really allowed us to kind of hone in on what we do really like about the spaces we're in, and kind of know like what we do want, and especially as well appreciate it when we do have a really good environment. So the past couple of summers we've been in Canada, had a house that we were staying in that had a lot more space and a lot more stuff in it as well. But we were just able to like appreciate it so much more, because you go through such, for us, long periods of time where it's like, oh, it'd be nice if we had more than like one studio apartment, or it'd be nice if we had an upstairs, or it'd be nice if we had an extra couch, and all these small things that you can really appreciate a lot more because you've, spent that time without all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think absolutely it's worth enjoying it. If you're going to go through the hassle of having to maintain all this stuff, it's worth actually taking advantage of the opportunity and the plus side that comes with it. I mean, just as a small example, as I'm sure you've experienced many times before, when you stay in Airbnbs, sometimes it's hard to find good places to work, and you end up sitting on the bed with your laptop or perching on a kind of a desk that's not really ideal and so forth. And it's great for me that now that we have this apartment, I have a room that I can work in. I have a standing desk, so I can stand or I can sit, and it's just really comfortable. And it's just makes it much easier to get on with stuff, especially if I'm working really early in the morning or something like that. And so these things are nice when you have them, and it's perfectly possible to make do and to adjust to other environments. But yeah, I agree. It's worth enjoying it when you can have a nice environment. And a part of that for us has been that we've chosen a very nice area to live in, which is very walkable, and it's easy for us to get around, and there's lots to do with kids here. And I'm really enjoying that too.
It was funny as you said that, Jake. Amanda and I both looked around our studio apartment that we have here in Monterey, and it's one of the blessings about this place is that it has a washing machine, but unfortunately it has no drying machine or drying rack. And so we've washed all our clothes, and they're like hung over like every nook and cranny. I have like a pair of pants hanging over a light behind us. And I had a video call early this morning, and I actually did it in our closet because it's a studio apartment. I was like, I can't wake up Amanda. So I had like a little phone as a light into the call in the closet. So we know exactly what you mean in terms of that space.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a totally having kids thing, but one of the things that we got as soon as we bought this place was we bought a really nice dryer. And because when you have kids, you're just constantly washing the entire time. And otherwise you are surrounded by washing, and it's great. It's just so nice not to be kind of hacking through hanging clothes the whole time, and especially in the winter. So yeah, I get it completely with the washing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if we had like 2 more humans in here with us that we had to wash clothes for, it would just be out of control. Like there's not that many free spaces as there is right now. And it's funny too, because as you were talking about, having your own space that you guys, you know where the furniture came from and you can set it up the way you like. I was thinking about how, we've also stayed in some places where it's like, this couch, I wonder how many people have sat on this. And I'm just gonna consciously not think about these things, because otherwise I'm going to feel grossed out. And I feel like that's the type of thing as a parent where you're like, coming back to like, is this the right thing for my child? Like your child probably doesn't understand that they shouldn't like stick their head in between the cracks of like a random couch type thing where there's like, who knows what down there. So I can as even a non-parent, I feel like I can definitely understand that decision, because I feel like if I was a mother, I would certainly be like, I would like some stuff that's maybe a little bit cleaner. I at least know where it comes from.
Yeah, there's so much entropy when you have kids. Like there's so much that you do so much clearing up and sorting out, that if you can control the environment more, it just makes life easier. So that's definitely a bonus.
Yeah, definitely. And so something I think we both deal with personally, a lot of people we talk to deal with, kind of like balancing this kind of call to adventure, this feeling of like, I want to go to the next place, or like it'd be cool to go to India or Africa or Spain, et cetera, et cetera. All of this, having this pull towards doing something new, something novel, and also that pull towards stability. Like, for us, we talk about sometimes like, maybe we should just get an apartment back in Canada, that type of thing. And obviously having children changes that equation, but have you noticed as you've been more stable and enjoying the benefits, has that like call to adventure and to like get out there still been there, or what's that experience been like for you?
Well, I mean, sounds cheesy to say it, but this is an incredible adventure, having two kids. I mean, it changes everything about your life, and it is an enormous psychological challenge and an emotional challenge. And at the moment, I feel great because we have found that it's brought us closer together, and it's been just a wonderful experience so far. But it is such a challenge that to me is kind of a big focus for my life at the moment, is adjusting to having kids, and also adjusting to the challenge of the responsibility that it puts on you. You have so much power as a parent that you could misuse, and that's such a huge responsibility. And not only do you have that, but at the same time, you get challenged, and you are sleep deprived sometimes, and you also have difficult situations, and you have to say no to a lot of stuff as well. So there are all these things that you could, if you weren't on top of your game, you could easily lose your cool and just basically act out on your kids. And so these are the things that I think about at the moment, and it's such a huge, exciting, and an awesome project that the idea of adventure in terms of travel, it doesn't really pull me at the moment. I don't feel like, I wish we could be in Thailand right now, exploring some new place or whatever, because I feel like this is an incredible and immense life experience that we're having. And so I'm quite focused on that. And I do want to have more adventures, especially more travel adventures, but I think adventures in life are things that challenge you and bring you to become a better person and become more of yourself, and to realize your weaknesses and face up to them, and to try and be the best person that you can be. And this is one of the biggest adventures that you can possibly have. It's such an awesome thing. And I want to say that because a lot of people I know, when they had kids, kind of moan about it and found it to be sometimes some people find it kind of depressing, but I think it's just such an incredible positive thing. And so that's kind of how I feel about this stage in our lives.
Yeah, I really like that point. I think something we've kind of realized as well is maybe when we were younger, feeling like this, like the first time we started traveling, we're doing like these long backpacking trips, and we both felt this feeling of like really feeling alive. And then we started our careers and really didn't feel that way in our first kind of opportunities in our careers, and kind of looked back towards traveling almost as like this kind of like be all end all. And I think people get into that zone of thinking like, travel is the be all end all, like that's what I need to be doing, which I definitely think like some people live really happy, productive lives that way. But then for us, I think realizing that there's so many things that can kind of tap into that feeling of fulfillment, like whether it's building a business, working on a career that you actually do love, that like, being self-directed in life. I think travel taps into that, but also so many other things do. And I think having kids, raising a family and doing it in a conscious way that's in line with your values, I think would probably be, right at the top of the list. So I think that is a really great point.
Yeah, for people who are into travel, and we certainly are. My wife and I love it, and have done the whole permanent travel thing. And really enjoy that lifestyle. I think you can either view having kids as being the thing that's going to stop your travel lifestyle, which is a bit of a downer to think of it like that way, or you can view it as the next type of adventure that you will go on. And I think if you feel like, oh, this is going to be this is where we have to stop traveling and, you know, settle down and live boring lives, whatever. If that's the way that you feel about having kids, then I think it's probably going to be no fun and probably going to be a depressing experience. But I think if you can get into it in the way that you were just saying, Ryan, and thinking about it as an experience that is going to be another adventure too, then it can be. It really can be, because it is such an amazing experience.
Yeah, and so I'm just thinking, as you're saying that, about kind of the journey you've been on, really, since a bit before we talked to you, of that process of selling your business, becoming location independent, making a move to Panama, starting a family, traveling more with the family, and then kind of basing yourself and coming home. And I'm curious, kind of, as you look at that kind of arc as a whole, from where you were 4 years ago to where you are today, is there anything you feel like kind of real big realizations that have changed, or maybe like advice you'd give to yourself when you were setting out to go to Panama at the start of all of that?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, in terms of advice I would have given myself, then in some ways it's an easy question to answer, because as I mentioned to you before, we went through this process of selling everything that we owned and moving to Panama. And then less than a year later, we came home again because my wife got pregnant and the Zika virus was there. So that turned out to be, that whole process turned out to be one that we didn't really need to go through. You know, we could have put our stuff in storage and we could have come back to a flat that I owned at the time, if we'd known that was going to be the case. So, but I'm not even sure that I would give that advice to myself, because that's the way these things go, especially with travel, that sometimes you make big plans and you have to make a huge change to them. And so I don't really regret that. I feel like, well, that we did the best with the information that we had at the time. So I think that's just the way that it goes. But the process has been a difficult decision-making process for us, of deciding to come back here. And, you know, we're still working through some of the questions about what the best approach is to education for our kids and so forth. So I feel like it's just a long learning process that we're still on, in terms of working out what the best way forward is. I guess the one thing that we really have learned in the last few years is how important community is. And I'm seeing that more and more, especially for my daughter, that, you know, she needs to have community too. And when you are doing the perpetual travel thing, especially if you're a couple, you can really get by using the internet to keep in touch with friends and family and so forth, and traveling around and being your own little community with each other. But it's different when you have kids, because they don't have that previous life or connections that they've built up. They need a community in the place where they're growing up, and that's something that we're still kind of struggling to build for them here, as a place where they can meet other kids that they're going to be able to interact with and have a good time with. And also, obviously, we want those kids to be good influences on them as well. So it's a challenge too, because finding people with similar values and similar approaches to parenting to us is also a challenge. So I think the biggest thing that we've kind of learned is how important the community aspect of it is. And I think I did underestimate that, especially because when you travel for a long time, you're able to make things work, going and visiting friends and keeping in touch via the internet and so forth. But when you have kids, it's a different matter, and it takes a long time to build up a real community. So that's something that, you know, we're looking into in the UK now, and we're doing a lot of connecting with other people with similar interests, like homeschooling and stuff like that. But that's the biggest thing that I think that we've come to learn, is just how important that is, and how it's not something that you can necessarily just switch on, especially if you've been traveling for years and years. And when you have kids, it's different too, because even if you have friends back home, if they're not in the same stage of life as you, then that's a very different situation. And so they're not going to be the kind of community for your kids, because, you know, if they don't have kids, then that just isn't there for them. But that's a big piece of the puzzle, especially for people who are interested in the kind of perpetual travel lifestyle. And it's one that I think will be relevant to anyone who's doing this lifestyle now and who plans to have kids, is that question of the community that you kind of need around you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something that Ryan and I have thought about a lot, just the two of us. Like when we go home now, we don't really have like a quote unquote group of friends. Like we have friends all over the world and really meaningful relationships that we see those people and we keep in touch with them and stuff, but it's not really the same as when we lived in one place all the time. And it's also something we've thought about too. Like both of us grew up in the same place our entire lives. And we were talking with our friends a couple weekends ago who have their 4 and 6-year-old and travel, and how they bring some routine into their kids' lives, and how they, are looking to build this community in, because it's like, I think you just don't really know like what's best. And sometimes I don't really know what's best for myself, much less another human. So I think it's kind of like figuring out, like what is going to be best for your children. Like for me, I'm like, oh, I wish that my parents would have traveled more with me when I was younger. But I think for them, they were like, oh, okay, we want to make sure she has a really stable upbringing. But then I'm like, if you give a kid a really I feel like unstable is the wrong word, but maybe dynamic upbringing, do they just crave stability as an adult? Like it's just kind of hard to know what is going to happen and what's going to be the right thing.
We find, this process also, it's not like I can say to my daughter, do you want to travel? Because it's not this, she's not old enough yet to process that question and, come up with a response that's going to be really going to be meaningful. But so at this stage, what we have to do is infer from the things that we think she finds really valuable, what would be best for her. And that's kind of the process that we went through, like I was talking about. We saw how much she likes recognizing places and how much she likes knowing what her options are, and knowing that if we're going to go out, we could go to this place or that place, and that there are these play spaces, that she knows kind of what to expect from them. It's predictability, basically. You can see, at least we can see, that she thrives on being able to have some predictability, because the whole world for kids is so unpredictable that having some things that you can predict means that you can start using your mind to think about other things too. So at this stage, we're really trying to infer what would be best for them from seeing how they thrive. And then later, I do hope that we will get to the point when they're older where we can have those conversations about saying, look, we could do this. We could do a 6-month trip, or we could, go and live somewhere else, and give them a taste of it and see how they respond to it. And then they can actually tell us what they want and what they would like. But it's tricky because you can't have those conversations until kids are at a stage where they're able to, where they have the experience to know what saying yes or no to something would actually mean. So that's kind of the process that we're going through, is trying to work out what would be best for them, and then later on getting to a point where we can just ask them.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard where you'd be like, do you want to travel? And they're like, yeah. And then you go and they're like, oh, I just meant like I wanted to go to the shop or something. Like, I just wanted to go to the park. I don't want to be in Spain.
Yeah.
Something that I'm curious about is sort of, I know the last time we talked with you, and something that you were really working, I think, pretty diligently on was the idea of sort of internationalizing yourself and setting up, businesses in different places. And I think that was kind of what you guys were doing when you went down to Panama. And I'm curious, where is your business at now? Are you still doing any internationalizing stuff, or where is that sort of at?
Yeah, so I do have a business based outside the UK. I'm using Estonia. I think I might have talked to you about it a bit before, but Estonia has got some very good support for people who are nomads. Basically, they have a very good setup there for people who want to travel and have a business and be based internationally. And even though we're in the UK at the moment, it works for me because in the future, if we want to travel, then it'll be very easy for me to continue running my business from Estonia because I can do everything online. And it's also just, I have a company that does all of the compliance stuff for me, and it works very well and very easily. And I think it's quite cost effective too. So I'm still doing that. And with regard to other things, we're still looking into different options for the future about further internationalizing. I do have assets abroad as well. So, I've done various things like that. But for the moment, we are based in the UK and we are fully UK residents and taxpayers and everything here. And so we're not expats anymore, and we haven't become non-residents. But I know exactly what the process is to do that. And so in the future, that may well be something that, we do again if the kids are going to be up for doing a move to somewhere else.
Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting to hear. And I'm curious, what has sort of been your experience like having a company in Estonia? I know you said it's been obviously working for you. So I'm curious, like, is it something that you recommend? What's sort of the process been like for setting that up and that sort of thing?
I totally recommend it because I think it just works really well. So my company, it's only a small business. I'm using it for my podcast, I have Patreon income, and I also have book income from my book sales and audiobook income and that kind of stuff. So if you are running an online business, selling digital products or something like that, then with Estonia, what you can do is become an e-resident, which is basically a kind of online identification that you can have for the purposes of signing contracts and setting up businesses in Estonia. So it means that once you become an e-resident, you get a special e-resident card from the Estonian embassy in the country where you are, and that gives you access to basically sign documents and stuff online in Estonia. So Estonia then makes it very easy for you to set up a business and to file your taxes and do all of that kind of stuff, because you do it all online and you do it all with basically this ID system of being an Estonian e-resident. And for myself, I actually use a company based in Estonia to manage all of the accounting and compliance and stuff for me. And that company, basically, I send them my receipts and stuff, but I have an Estonian company, I have an Estonian bank account, I have things like PayPal and all that kind of stuff, all linked to my company. And I just do it all online. And you kind of log in and you get a dashboard showing your income and showing what your expenses are, and they organize it all. And I think they do it very cost effectively too. The company that I use used to be called Leap In, and it's now called Solo, spelled with an X OLO. And I can send you some links for if you want for kind of what this is all about for people who are more interested. But yeah, I think it's a great way to do it. And so I highly recommend it. And if you are interested, if you want to do it, they actually, I think you get a couple of months free if you use my referral code, which is Jake. So you're welcome to, if you want to set up your own business there, I would recommend them. I think they're great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely put that in our show notes and have a bit more information on it. We actually recently talked to Simon from Freedom Surfer a little while ago as well. So I think...
Oh, yeah. He has one with them too.
Yeah, I can't remember. He didn't mention anything about a referral, but we were just kind of talking about this idea in general, especially about how, so many people are doing even, just various degrees of like kind of becoming multinational, right? Like you're living in different places, you're working as an entrepreneur, you're working online, your customers are in different countries, all of this stuff. And I think a lot of people don't really think about the options there are that creates for you in terms of, basing businesses in certain places. So I will definitely have more information in that. And kind of on that point, we were kind of curious about a little bit more about kind of that experience in Panama. Obviously, it's a couple years ago, but in terms of basing yourself there and that kind of process of becoming a resident of Panama at the time, was that something that you think, if circumstances were different, could have worked out for you long term, or is that what was that process like?
Oh, yeah, it was actually quite easy. Panama makes it very easy for people from they have a list of so-called friendly nations, which is basically the US, Canada, and Western Europe, and probably a few more. And if you're from one of those countries, they make it very easy for you to go and become a resident there. And there are various different programs. There's an entrepreneurship program that I went through, and there's a couple of other programs, and they all have different criteria. You have to set up a company and have a bank account with a certain amount of money and that kind of stuff. But it's all very straightforward. And frankly, if it wasn't for the Zika virus, we would probably still be there because we really enjoyed it there. It was very easy to go there. We were just in the process of kind of establishing ourselves when along came our daughter and the Zika virus at the same time. So that changed our plans. But in terms of it being a kind of an option as a location, I think it's a very easy one. And there are lots of lawyers and so forth who can help you go through the process. And we had a local lawyer there who helped us through the process. And we would have kind of completed the process and actually become residents and stayed there if it wasn't for the change in our own personal circumstances with our daughter.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Definitely something that Amanda and I are thinking of and planning that Panama trip a little bit later this year. All right. So I think it's really great to catch up, Jake. I think you and Hannah and starting a family, it's something that Amanda and I are really looking for in our life as we're kind of thinking about these things. Like other people are going through similar journeys, maybe at slightly different places, but being able to pick your brain about it and just find out about more about your experience has been really, really valuable. And I'm really glad we had the chance to catch up.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much for inviting me back on.
And so if people want to go find out more about you, listen to your show, where's the best place for them to get in touch online?
I think the best place is just to go to thevoluntarylife.com, which is the website for my podcast. And you can also find links to my books and stuff from there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. And for everyone listening, if this is the first time you've heard Jake on the podcast, make sure and go back and listen to our first episode. We talked quite a bit in that episode as well about your book, Job Free. So people should definitely check that out as well. I feel like it's still just a really, really good resource for the different ways and kind of like putting all the different ways that are out there into one place, because I think it is still something where there's a lot of different wormholes, and that does a really good job of overviewing the different ways that you can kind of become job free. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.